Those who come in compact cars like cheap customers just leave. For my mom's 60th birthday, I decided to take her and my daughter to a fancy restaurant that's known to be always booked. But there was unexpected trouble at the restaurant. The restaurant manager started making fun of us, calling us poor. Then, "Let's just leave." My mother, clearly angry, spat those words. But the manager just smirked. However, all the other customers stood up at once, glaring at the manager. My name is Rebecca Miller, 28 years old. I'm a single mother with a 3-year-old daughter. I separated from my husband due to differences in our values. After that, I decided to raise my daughter on my own. When I went back home to share the news, my mother welcomed us warmly. All the tension I'd been holding back was released, and I broke down in tears. Seeing me like this, my mother offered for us to live with her. She's been living alone since my father passed away a few years ago. She said she'd be happy to have us, so I accepted her kind offer. My mother is turning 60 this year. I wanted to do something special for her, so I booked a reservation at that upscale restaurant. It said that the restaurant is booked for years in advance. I always wanted to try it once. I was ready for a long wait, but luckily there was a cancellation, and I got a reservation for my mom's birthday month. When I told my mom, she was thrilled. Just seeing her reaction made it all worth it. Finally, the day of our reservation arrived. I drove my mom and daughter to the restaurant. I never imagined we'd run into any problems. "You're Ms. Rebecca Miller, who made a reservation, right? Please come this way." The grand entrance was befitting of a high-end restaurant. My mother and I were in awe, admiring the lavish decor. Only my daughter was her usual cheerful self. Seeing her, both my mom and I smiled. Seeing how happy my mom looked, I felt this was going to be a great day. "After making you wait, here's the appetizer." A salad was placed in front of us, with precise movements. Just seeing the dish made both me and my mom excited. They also had a special menu for my daughter, which I thought was a great touch. While we were enjoying our meal, my mom glanced around the restaurant. "I know that person. And that one over there. The one on TV? Yeah." While helping my daughter with her food, my mom replied with a smile. At that moment, I thought to myself, and looked around just like my mother would. Indeed, I recognized many of the faces around me, and I felt as if I had joined this glamorous world. Furthermore, it appeared that everyone was smiling at the delightful sight of my mother and daughter. Even though they were accommodating when I made the reservation, I had hesitations about bringing my young child. But the reassuring looks from those around me finally made me feel at ease. The appetizers were done, and the first main course was brought out. Seeing the elegant and lavish presentation, I instinctively took out my phone and snapped a photo. Immediately, a staff member approached me. It was a different person from the one who showed us to our table. He had a very displeased look, which made me feel a bit taken aback. "Excuse me, can you please not take photos?" he said. "Oh. I'm sorry, This is what happens with poor folks. Why do we even have people like you in our establishment? Who let you in?" "Huh?" I clearly heard the muttered comment from the staff. And it made me feel quite uncomfortable. Trying not to let it show, I looked down. Not wanting to dampen my mother's spirits. But as I wrestled with my feelings, my daughter's crying brought me back to reality. She had dropped the bread she was eating on the floor. Her cries echoed in the quiet restaurant. Others started turning their attention to us, and in a panic, I tried to soothe her. But the more I rushed, the less effective I was. That's when the earlier rude staff member approached. "Ma'am, you're disturbing the other patrons with the noise." "I'm so sorry. I'll calm her down right away. You shouldn't bring kids to places like this." His sarcasm was evident, and this time my mother clearly heard him. Those words seemed to have reached my mother's ears this time. She frowned and spoke softly but firmly to the staff member. "Your attitude is what's really tarnishing the reputation of this place. However, her words backfired. The staff's attitude became even more hostile. You do realize this isn't a place for children, right? I was just letting you know. If you keep making a scene, should I call security? His arrogance and rudeness made both me and my mother's blood boil. But we realized that getting angry would only play into his hands. Taking a deep breath, I tried to remain calm. Beside me, I could hear my mother doing the same. I truly apologize for the disturbance. My daughter has stopped crying. Can you give us a moment? The staff member, arms crossed, stared at us, waiting for our next move. Could you calm down? You're inconveniencing other guests. I distracted my daughter by giving her some bread from my plate. She immediately stopped crying and started eating happily. I let out a sigh of relief and, after sharing a glance with my mom, I tried to apologize to the staff again before taking my seat. But the staff, looking even more irritated, confronted us again. Do you even understand what I'm saying? I'm telling you to leave. This restaurant is too upscale for you. But my daughter has calmed down. She might cry again, right? And each time she does, you'll be disturbing everyone. This is supposed to be a fine dining restaurant. You're ruining the experience for others. We haven't even received half of our meal. We've already paid in advance, and we informed the restaurant about my daughter when we made the reservation. There shouldn't be a problem. So what? This is exactly why poor people like you have such low standards. If you keep this up, I'm gonna call the manager. The disgruntled staff member quickly walked off to the staff room. My mother and I were left speechless, wondering how someone could be so rude. Didn't he realize that his attitude was what was truly lowering the restaurant's standards? Despite this being a special celebration for my mother's 60th birthday, my mood was completely ruined. While it's true that I'd made a scene, I couldn't be too confrontational about it. Pondering our next move, my mother and I exchanged looks when the earlier staff member came back, now with a man who looked to be the manager. Upon seeing his face, I inadvertently let out a gasp. That's because the manager was none other than my middle school classmate, Daniel Thompson. Is that you, Rebecca? Daniel seemed to remember me too. The staff member, with a surprised look, asked him, "Do you know her?" I felt a wave of relief. Back in school, Daniel was always the earnest and cheerful type, quite reserved. He typically hung out in small groups, separate from the mixed group I was part of. I remembered him mainly because he once confessed to having feelings for me. At that time, I was seeing someone, so I had declined. But even after that, we'd talked a few times. I thought Daniel would have addressed the staff's behavior. Oh, Rebecca was my classmate. By the way, Rebecca, are you sure you should be here? What do you mean? I heard the rumor, you know. You're a single mom now, right? People say single moms are usually broke. My restaurant is high-end. It'd be a problem if you said you couldn't pay later. Daniel looked at me with a mocking smile, sizing me up without any restraint. I was taken aback, blinking in disbelief. I had remembered him as a kind soul in middle school. It seemed he had changed a lot. How can you say that? I made a reservation and paid in advance. Right. You've always been headstrong, haven't you? Maybe that's why your husband got tired of you? You gotta know how to flatter sometimes. What does that have to do with anything? Why does it matter? Isn't that your compact car outside? What if it is? When I replied with a hint of irritation, Daniel chuckled. People who drive compact cars can leave. What? I was genuinely shocked by Daniel's statement. Didn't you notice when you parked? No one else drives a compact car here. Everyone's driving Mercedes or something similar. Aren't you embarrassed to be so out of place? He looked at me with utter contempt. It seems the Daniel who once said he liked me was long gone. His change was so baffling. He sized us up with a look of disdain. You look downright poor. Not fitting for my restaurant. You get that the staff was right, so why don't you just leave? I began to get irritated by the treatment, as if they were lecturing us, as if we were making a fuss and refusing to leave the store. After all, we had made a reservation and paid. We had every right to dine there. Judging people based on appearances was something I could never imagine the old Daniel doing. But after all he said, there's no reason for my mom and me to stay. The food might be good, but we don't want anything to do with a restaurant that has disrespectful staff and a manager. Daniel, you've changed. If you're going to be like this, we're leaving. When I said that, he seemed satisfied. I'm living the dream. I'm definitely better off than you now. Don't think you can just casually call me by my first name. It's a shame you've changed. When I said that, Daniel smirked. That's because you rejected me. Making fun of me even though you're not that pretty. Well, at least I'm happier now. Isn't it refreshing? He cheerfully said that and high-fived a nearby staff member. Both of them laughed. Apparently, Daniel still held a grudge about being rejected back in the day. Realizing that made his horrible attitude make sense to me. Humph. Say whatever you want. I'm surely happier than some guy who still holds a grudge from so long ago. I have a wonderful daughter and a kind mother. Let's go, Mom. When I snapped back confidently, Daniel seemed to become even more pleased. He probably thinks I'm just being a sore loser. It ticks me off to no end, but shouting at him now would probably have no effect on him. I never imagined a classmate of mine would change so much. Today was supposed to end on such a happy note. With these thoughts, I picked up my daughter and looked at my mom. She too seemed furious, as she abruptly stood up. You've made quite a mockery of my daughter. We don't want anything to do with a place like this. As you said, we'll be leaving. Right, folks? My mom made that declaration loudly, echoing throughout the restaurant. Neither Daniel nor I had any idea whom she was addressing. Then, to our surprise, all the diners who had been enjoying their meals started to get up and prepare to leave. What on earth was happening? I was just stunned, not understanding the situation. Wait. Folks, what's going on? I'm sorry for the ruckus, we're gonna kick these rude folks out right away, just hang on a moment. Daniel frantically tried to keep the diners from leaving. But cold stares were directed at him from every corner. Daniel was visibly flustered, not understanding the turn of events. Two elderly men approached him, shouting, "How dare you treat Mrs. Miller like that? We've enjoyed this place for a long time, but we'll never come back." Shouted at, Daniel looked around the restaurant with a fearful expression. Following the two elderly men's lead, all the other diners started scolding Daniel. They all began expressing their gratitude to my mother. While holding my daughter, I was just gawking at this astonishing scene from the side. Those who began chastising Daniel were all recognizable celebrities, politicians, and obvious affluent folks. I had no idea why they were indebted to my mother. Wait! What's going on here? What happened? Daniel, his face turning blue, desperately tried to calm everyone. The annoying staff member next to Daniel was also going pale. I sent a questioning look to my mom. Then she revealed a shocking truth. All these people used to be my regular customers when I was a traditional sweets maker. What? I was just as shocked as Daniel. I knew my mom had been a sweets maker, but I had no idea she catered to such clientele. Then one of the celebrities next to us said, "Mrs. Miller's sweets were the best in the country." My mom listened to those words with an embarrassed expression. I might not be a professional craftsman anymore, but thanks to them, I surely became proficient. I'm truly grateful. In that sense, the customer is truly a god. Hearing that, I felt my mother's greatness deeply. Daniel looked completely taken aback, holding his breath and tensing up. My mom approached the stunned Daniel and spoke in a calm tone. You also need to cherish your customers. This store is precious to you, isn't it? At my mother's words, Daniel growled in response. He seemed totally on the defensive. Still, trying not to be outdone, he feigned confidence. Hey, quit it! What's this about the customer being God? Such an outdated way of thinking isn't popular nowadays. Daniel's scream, which could be taken as a cry of anguish, echoed across the floor. Yet, my mom didn't even flinch. You think caring for the customer is just a passing trend? Hearing this, Daniel choked back his words. He seemed intimidated by my mom's firm stance. However, rather defiantly, Daniel wouldn't accept my mother's viewpoint. We are the ones providing the food. We're more important than the customers. This is absurd. I am important. If your daughter, Rebecca, hadn't rejected me, I wouldn't have treated you this way. That's right. Apologize to me right now, and maybe I'll even consider making Rebecca my woman. That would be a way out of your struggling life. Sounds good, doesn't it? Daniel said that, looking at me. I was utterly disgusted with him and sighed deeply. I'm sorry, but to be honest, I can't deal with you right now. As I told him off and lowered my head, chuckles arose from the surrounding crowd, and Daniel's face turned beet red. Although I thought my response was pretty obvious, Daniel, with his baffling confidence, seemed to have never expected another rejection. Why not? I have money, you know. You don't want to be looked down upon, right? And isn't it embarrassing to be a single mother? Women like you probably can't remarry, so I'm offering to take you. It's none of your business. Just because you have money doesn't guarantee happiness. She brushed him off, and his face turned even redder. I wondered if money was the reason behind Daniel's transformation. They say money can lead to one's downfall, but seeing it firsthand was a first for me. How dare a single mother like you talk back to me? By now, whatever Daniel said didn't resonate with me at all. In fact, after hearing my mother's words, Daniel's just seemed pitiful. Then, a loud voice echoed from the back of the restaurant. All of us in the store were startled and looked for the source. A middle-aged man appeared. Seeing him, Daniel instantly looked uneasy. Daniel! What on earth are you doing? Why is Dad here? I heard Mrs. Miller and her family were dining here, so I wanted to greet them. What's with all this commotion? It seemed that the man who appeared was Daniel's father. I hadn't seen him since middle school, but he seemed very stern and dignified. Earlier, one of the staff had muttered something about the boss. So, this man must be the owner of the restaurant. I gave you the position of manager after hearing you lost your job, but the business is only declining. Now I see why. What? You saw? Yes, I arrived a bit earlier. I peeked in when I heard the noise, and there you were, insulting Mrs. Miller's family. With all the arrogant things you were saying, do you even realize how wonderful a person Mrs. Miller is? The boss interrogated him, and Daniel was sweating bullets. What? This old hag is supposed to be someone special? Watch your mouth. Mrs. Miller helped fund the opening of this restaurant. Huh? This old lady has that kind of money? Of course. Mrs. Miller's husband owned a famous traditional candy store. And Mrs. Miller herself worked in the tough world of candy making, even as a woman. She's experienced so much more in life than you. I wish I could boil down her wisdom and give you a taste. The owner said all this in a huff, then turned to face us. I'm so sorry for the trouble my foolish son has caused. Come on, apologize. Why should I? I'm the manager of this upscale restaurant. Didn't you trust my abilities enough to leave me in charge? This is my place. I make the rules. Enough of your arrogance. Oh, what have I done, making someone like you the manager? That's it. I'm so disappointed in you. You're never setting foot in this place again. What? Daniel's mouth dropped open in shock. In a panic, he began to apologize to his father, but the owner's decision was firm. You're apologizing to the wrong person. You should be apologizing to Mrs. Miller and her family. Please, I'm so sorry. I've finally made it and I don't want to lose it all over something like this. And you're still going on about that? You unbelievable guy. The owner shrugged in sheer disbelief, his face showing obvious shock. Of course, he'd be feeling this way. No one would want to find out their child was so arrogant and disrespectful. If my daughter had been like that, I would have made the same decision as the owner. We all glared coldly at Daniel. The owner then began to share the story of how Daniel started working at the upscale restaurant. Apparently, Daniel used to work at a renowned hotel. But he racked up debts from gambling, and debt collectors caused chaos at the hotel, resulting in his firing. Lost and desperate, Daniel returned home to his father, who worked at an upscale restaurant, and begged for a job. At the time, Daniel's father had been offered a promotion to become the CEO of the company. So he decided to leave the upscale restaurant to his son and oversee several other restaurants in the same chain. At first, Daniel worked sincerely, and the owner had peace of mind. However, sales at Daniel's restaurant began to drop significantly. The owner had been trying to figure out the cause for a long time. I've received complaints about Daniel's terrible attitude from the staff. But there was no evidence. And I wanted to believe him since he's my son. Today, that hope turned to certainty. It's truly a shame. The owner looked at Daniel with a dejected expression. Daniel, looking as if he'd been struck by lightning, began to apologize desperately. Dad, please forgive me. I've been doing my best, haven't I? Rebecca, please say something to my dad for me. What exactly should I say? We were classmates, remember? For old time's sake. After how you acted, you're really something. You truly are the worst. No way! Seeing the disdain in my eyes, Daniel looked even more dejected. Both my mother and I were so taken aback that we just sighed. After that, Daniel lost his position as the manager of a high-end restaurant and was disowned by his father, leaving him without a home to return to. It was later revealed that Daniel had accumulated new debts he had kept hidden. Despite earning a good salary, he spent almost all of it on gambling, treating his staff poorly almost daily. However, he favored one particular staff member who always gave us a hard time. That's because this staff member was Daniel's junior from his college days. It seems hiring him was also on Daniel's orders. Given this junior's problematic work attitude, it seems he was kicked out of the restaurant along with Daniel. Having lost everything, Daniel delved even deeper into gambling to drown his sorrows. Now, he seems to be struggling to pay off his debts. He's really not a good person at all. My mother's 60th birthday celebration got ruined, so we gathered all the people who were at the restaurant that day and later rented a room in a hotel for a party. That hotel was owned by Daniel's father, who generously let us use a room for free as an apology. I made many friends there. And I realized just how much people loved my mother. Everyone there had met her when she worked as a traditional sweet maker, coming to her shop to buy sweets as gifts. The fact that she still has connections to this day is probably because she's such a charming person. I too want to emulate my mother and become a mother my daughter looks up to.